Hello. Hello everyone, and welcome to the final session of the day of the Bucks Learner Day. A very special welcome to our panel. Just to introduce myself, my name is Raj Unsworth, and I will be chairing this session. And what an absolutely amazing day you guys have had. Teachers in Buckinghamshire and beyond, because I believe that the day was actually open to others as well. I've been in for such a fantastic treat. Well done to Emma Kell and her colleagues for organising a truly inclusive day. And when I say inclusive, I mean inclusive with a capital I. Now, to introduce ourselves, firstly, I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves. That will be followed by a Q&A session. I've got some pre-prepared questions. And then at the end of it, I believe Emma wants to come in and have a few words just to finish off the day. So to start off with, guys, would you like to introduce yourself one by one, please? Valerie?
Hi, my name is Valerie Daniel. I'm a head teacher in Birmingham in a nursery school. This has been an amazing day, Emma. Thank you ever so much, and thank you for the opportunity for presenting.
James, you're next.
Hi, I'm James. I have been a lead practitioner and I've been a head of department. I am now working as an ITT tutor and an LGBT activist. And yeah, thank you to Emma Kell today for providing an amazing opportunity to voices who aren't heard very often.
And Kat.
Thanks, Raj. I'm Cat Priggs. I work with Emma in Bucks. So I'm the director of a teaching school that works alongside Emma's teaching school. And just want to echo what you've said about her efforts. I know how much work she's put into this. And I'm also an assistant head teacher at a school in Bucks.
And last but not least, Trevor.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. It's been a fantastic day, and thank you, Raj, for chairing the panel. Yeah, my name's Trevor, and I'm an outreach or specialist outreach caseworker, working for a pupil referral unit, and also a mindfulness teacher. Thank you.
Okay, right. So I think the topic covered today during the day have been so varied. And whilst I appreciate that you guys may not have watched or even had an opportunity to listen to all of the presentations, I think the fact that they've been so well publicised probably gave you a clue as to the content. And therefore, what I want to hear from you is what stood out for you. And then how do you think today was different from other conferences that you've attended or been to? What have you learned that's new? And finally, what have you learned about yourself as a result of today? Those four things. If you forget, I'll chip in and remind you. But basically, what stood out for you? How was today different? What have you learned from it? And what have you learned about yourself? Valerie, would you like to kick off, please?
Okay, with what stood out for me, I learned quite a bit about the claim strategy from Angela's presentation, which both challenged me and also allowed me a strategy to reclaim stories like these that have happened in my life. I have a very unfocused way of dealing with these issues anyway, but what this did was that it gave me a tangible approach of working through issues like these. So you feel less like a victim and you can reclaim these stories in a tangible way. I also really liked Jane and Denise's workshop on CPD. It left me with a sense of nostalgia, as this way of working is quite endemic in the early years, but is actually being eroded and diminished because of budgets and things that we have going on in nursery schools. So I think the trick for me is to encourage, despite everything, an expansive working environment where self-improvement is endemic, despite the pressures to keep a restricted work environment, which will only focus on reactive CPD and mandatory CPD. So I'm going to continue working on CPD that improves staff, and then they use that to improve our school environment.
Okay, James, next please. You can unmute yourself.
Sorry. Thank you. Yeah, it was amazing today to see so much talk about inclusion and pastoral care in a culture that can quite often feel really exams focused and kind of on the inhuman side of treating students more like numbers and data rather than people. I was really interested, especially in the increasing recognition of intersectionality between these different issues. For example, I had a really good discussion with Matt Pinkett about how issues of masculinity that were visible in his book Boys Don't Try are also often issues that face LGBT plus males and trans gay males too. And actually how when we find similarities between these two different groups, we can aid both groups not only to help themselves, but also to work together and find common ground to kind of avoid further prejudice. I think it's really important to recognise these similarities of experience. And when we look at movies like Pride, the classic movie about how lesbians and gays supported the miners, in my school I had a feminist group, a BAMI group, etc. And what was key was getting these groups to work together and finding how they had experienced similar forms of oppression, whilst equally learning about each other's differences and appreciating one another's differences. For me, moving forwards, I think Shoaib Khan's session really reminded me that I still have so much to learn about other areas of oppression, and it was really interesting hearing his views on race and Black Lives Matter.
Kat?
Thanks, Raj. I was really blown away by Alison Creel's session. And she talked about so many things in her session, but one thing that really stood out for me was how she spoke about anti-racism. And she was saying to us, you know, don't look up anti-racism, don't Google it. You need to find your own way. You need to find your own approach that is absolutely appropriate for your setting and your context. And obviously that should be underpinned by the community that your school's in and your student body. But it has to be at the heart of what you do. And if you try and force change by trying to fit in with what other people are doing, then it's not going to be sustainable. And then within that, one of the things that she said that really struck me, and it's particularly resonant this week, given some of the news that was leaked earlier in the week about the curriculum and the message that we may have to narrow the curriculum for certain students, which really worried me as a history teacher, but more generally thinking about those subjects that I know are essential to students' development. But she was talking about it from a different perspective, and she was saying, you know, for students who may be disadvantaged or kind of pigeonholed in a group, don't narrow the curriculum for those students, because you're, you know, despite the fact that some schools may be trying to narrow the curriculum to kind of improve their performance, you're kind of you're not necessarily improving their performance at all. You're trying to get them to kind of a minimum benchmark point. And by ensuring a broad curriculum for all, you're ensuring equal access of opportunity. So it linked back to what she was saying about equity. So I just loved her talk. I think she was absolutely spot on, and it made me think about how we go about kind of tackling anti-racism in a way that's really personal to our communities.
So, thank you, Kat. Trevor, please.
Yeah, I think as well, it's sort of like looking at anti-racism, you know, it's got to start with the individual. It's got to start at the heart and mind, because it's a process, it's an embodied process. And I think it's when we're dealing in education and we're looking at our young people as vulnerable as they are, if there isn't many people of colour that are in actually leadership, and the lack of diversity, then there is no role models for them to aspire to. So I think that's an important part. And then that does go back to actually identifying the individual person themselves initially, and then looking out on a wider scale. And then when we're talking about inclusion and inclusion, I think that's one of the fundamental things, that there has to be, you know, you have to start from top-down management and looking at how we could actually include Black Lives Matter into education. And also, I think when we're looking at I know my colleagues were talking about the diversity that was spoken, and I think there was one on trauma. I didn't get to see much because I was traveling to meet my colleague at our workplace. at that point in time. But I think it's important just to recognise that there is a lack of diversity within education, and it is a heart and mind body that we have to look to ourselves as individuals to say, how can we include more ethnic groups, more people of colour into society. And mindfulness was one of the ones that we spoke about. And I think with mindfulness, it's about it's developing these heart and mind capacities that can actually help with compassion, help with loving kindness, help with things like, so when you're identifying social change, it's looking at the actual person, because we can look to the system, but the system is not going to change unless we as individuals change first. So yeah, so those things kind of stand out for me, what I'm passionate about.
Thank you, Trevor. It sounds to me like you've had a brilliant day, all of you, and you've all come at it from a slightly different perspective. And I think you've inadvertently also answered a little bit of my next question. So what I'm going to do is move on to the one after that, which is actually, if you are a school leader and thinking about what you have just said, about what you've taken on board today, what changes will you make to the way you run your school to ensure that all teachers feel truly valued and appreciated, bearing in mind, what Trevor's just been saying as well? And then if you're not a school leader and you're a teacher, what changes would you like your school leaders to make, which would better support you and help you to improve your practice? So I'm kind of looking at it from leadership perspective and teacher perspective. So I don't mind which of your which area you focus on, but just let me hear a little bit about that. We go back in the same order. So Valerie first again, please.
As a school leader, we now have mammoth challenges, especially with reduced budgets. And I think one of the things that tends to go really quickly is all the efforts you make around how your staff feel valued, which is quite sad, actually. Because what we have in place is, in my school, is I do a yearly meet with all my staff. That immediately got cut once I lost staff, I lost teachers, because my capacity to do that got cut. We have 6 weekly supervisions where staff get an opportunity to talk about whatever is challenging them in their classrooms. That's been reduced to literally having it 3 times a year. So I think what we need to do, and what this session has taught me, is about reframing the things that we do within our school year so that we are valuing our staff. And one of the things I've decided to do is to set some of these activities, because we do like a number of inset days. We have activities like fishbowl activities and things where we work through issues. But it's to make sure now that we set these activities on an agenda and have cover for it, so that it's embedded within the budget, and that it does happen, even if it has to happen less, but that when it does happen, it has the right kind of impact. So that's one of the things I am looking at. And the other thing is, I'm fascinated by the technology we've been using in the last how many weeks of lockdown. And it has proven, I don't love it, but I have to look at how effective it's been in reaching people at strange times and different times, and us being able to literally still meet face to face. So that's one of the things I will be embedding as well. Thank you.
James?
Yeah, so I'll talk on 2 levels. Firstly, on my kind of school capacity, I'd like us to continue to think about how we create communities of teachers who have the skills and informations they need to support groups that face issues of inclusion. I had a really interesting discussion this morning with an NQT female heterosexual teacher who said, am I in a position where I can feel comfortable to talk about LGBT plus issues? Should I be sort of staying in my lane, or can I be involved in this? Well, yes, absolutely. If you go away and you educate yourself, anyone can do diversity and equalities work. It isn't up to LGBT plus teachers to run an LGBT plus social group. It's not up to BAMI teachers to feel that they have to be the only kind of arbiters of Black knowledge. They play an important part in that, but we can all share our positive values and experiences of it. Shoaib Khan talking about a female colleague who was approached about FGM because of her race, when actually we should be fostering a culture where everyone can support students in that, and anyone can feel approached. On another level, I'd be interested in looking at kind of educational leaders on social media, and especially Twitter, because I think actually there's a huge influence there too. And I think we need to really think about how people with platforms are using these to influence inclusivity in schools. Dr. Emma Kell is a prime example as an educational influencer, as someone who elevates and celebrates voices who don't normally get heard. And as educational leaders, I'd like to see more Twitter influencers using their platforms to raise awareness and support equalities activists. Having a platform is a real privilege, and it's important that we aren't just selling businesses and books, but we're educating, learning and equipping ourselves and using that to elevate others. I think there's been some good movement during Black Lives Matter, but it's really key that that isn't tokenistic. If tweets about dual coding or direct instruction can reach hundreds of thousands daily, why can't tweets about equality too? Thank you.
Thank you, James. Kat, your turn next.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on one quote from James there, that I jotted down as well, that platform is privilege and with privilege comes responsibilities. I thought that was a fantastic quote. And I'd like to apply that to a bit of a different focus. So I also dropped into the flexible working session today. And recently I've returned to work literally about a week and a half before lockdown after my maternity leave. And before I actually even started maternity leave, I never really had a fire in my belly for flexible working and supporting women who want a career and they want to be a good mum. So dropping into that session today again reminded me about things that I want to do when I'm back in the workplace. And I plucked up the courage to speak at a Women Ed event at the beginning of March, and there were a couple of things that I mentioned there about, as a member of SLT, things that I would like to start doing. So some of those include, like, first of all, having an advocate on SLT for new mums or new dads, people who have been on parental leave, and thinking about how through line management structures you can support those people. Thinking about the types of things that aren't kind of running around their heads and are not completely obvious to them. So as a member of SLT, I was incredibly embarrassed having to ask somebody what time period 3 started when I was back in my first week after mat leave. So considering things that members of staff have missed, making sure that they're up to date with who the new colleagues are in school, important student information, new processes, new procedures. And then one thing that we've done as our SLT, and I think this can kind of factor into that, is to include staffing as a regular item on SLT agendas. And I think that echoes some of what Valerie was saying. We had, so this week we had a drop down week. Our students were set enrichment activities and we tried to give our teachers a bit of headspace. And we had a whole staff inset day on Monday. And as part of the session, we took SLT out of it, and then we grouped our staff and put them into virtual staff rooms and let them just talk about their experiences over the last few months. And I think we've got a bit of a broken system at the moment, and we need to be really careful that we're putting pressure in the right place, and we're putting, well, that's the wrong way to phrase it, putting emphasis in the right place. And you know, our staff are going to be feeling that more than ever. But I feel like, you know, flexible workers, part-time workers like me, I know that I've not been working part-time hours. So I think it's kind of my job now to go back into school and think about how I can support people who are in the same kind of position.
Thank you, Kat. That was a very comprehensive response. Trevor?
I just unmute myself. Yeah, I mean, I can really share from my own personal experience. If we're looking at leadership and we're looking at SLT, so even in my organisation, there isn't one black person or person of colour on senior leadership team. Why? We can go as far as saying, and there's many that are qualified, Myself, I recently, I've got my degree, I've got a master. So if we're looking at qualifications, which then what does that say when actually it's got to be more than that? So looking at the ideology. So if someone's born, let's just say, into Christianity, it's very difficult to change their faith or their belief. And it's the same in a sense for privilege at the helm. If you're born into that ideology or you're taught that from a very young age, it's extremely difficult to change the concept and the way of thinking. So my question is, when we look at decision making, that's a really important part as to where we put in certain people in certain departments, because at the end of the day, the crux of it is everybody matters. There's going to be low staff morale amongst those people of colour who are not in positions that could do the same jobs. So we're looking at organisational methods of implementation. So there has to be more accountability and scrutiny from parliamentarians on the whole agenda. So if you're looking at Black Lives, if you're looking at LGBT, all of those things that matter to people, there has to be more that's done on a political level. So one theory, so solutions. So for myself, if we're looking at, we all have to do safeguarding, we all have to do child protection as part of a CPD, we all have to do other things, but then those things, FGM, those things linked to emotional, physical and mental abuse. So Black awareness on CPD, within that there is the tags of emotional, mental and physical abuse. So just to find out, see where those unconscious biases are, what is the fear of why a set of privileged people will sit around a table when you have really good qualified Black people that could actually do the job. So I will say it as it is, and be frank, because it goes back to, we're all teaching young people. What are young people seeing in society? Well, they're actually seeing, what can I aspire to? There's nothing to aspire to, because once again, to me, it's something that we see on a daily basis. So if we're looking at loads of politicians like Caroline Lucas MP, Chris Ruin MP. So I know I've mentioned mindfulness before, but just actually taking that time and pause, and then capturing that breath to see, actually, let's look around and see what is actually visible, what's going on, rather than just having that mindset of what you were taught, that mindset of, well, this is the way it is because this is how it is in schools. We're following the same as everybody else, so we'll do the same as everyone. But I think we can make that difference. So as a person in a proof of referral unit, myself, I know that I'm qualified to be on SLT, but I've never been approached. So it kind of shows you where you have that systemic racism, systemic bureaucracy that is in it. And I'm not saying that my company or companies are racist, because many people say they don't see colour. But if you don't see colour, then you can't see discrimination. And we're being discriminated against on SLT, gender, where, so it's there. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor, for that. Now, I want to switch focus, actually, away from teachers and leaders, and let's talk about pupils. So within the context of the past few months, COVID-19, disproportionate impact on communities, Black Lives Matter, and pretend you are a pupil today, but you have the wisdom and you have the knowledge that you have as adults. So what I want you to think about is, what would you like to see included in the curriculum? I firmly believe that we have a slightly broken society, probably a majorly broken society. So what is it that you would like to see included in the curriculum if you were a child today? Valerie?
I think I want to see truth. I'm tired of having a whitewashed version of what truth is supposed to be. So I want truth about history. I want a balanced curriculum that truthfully tells about the many achievements of Black people and Asian people, what they contribute to society, because not telling those truths are rendering us faceless. And rendering us faceless means that we're valueless in society, and we're not. So I want a curriculum that does not covertly work against me as a member of the non-majority population. I want to be accepted and treated with respect for my academic choices and not be undermined. And the reason I've said that was my son chose physics when he was in high school, and there were three Black children in that class, and the teacher consistently undermined them because he didn't want them in the class. And what he did, he should have been fired for. It was just, you don't belong. Why would you choose this? Couldn't you have gone, chosen woodwork or chosen something else? But physics is not for you, so please leave. Another thing about that was my son wanted to be a pilot, and he used to fly. And he ended up having to fight a case about racism as young as he was, because he was really being treated quite badly. And he won the case, but he still had to leave, because when it comes to things like, and this is as serious as it gets, when it comes to things like your parachutes and things like that, you don't want to feel that somebody is actually that annoyed with you that they will sabotage what you have. And it got as serious as that he had to make the choice to leave anyway, despite winning. So he didn't win that, and that's the bottom line about that. I really would like to challenge our school curriculums. Is it inclusive and unbiased? Are we embedding unconsciously superiority and inferiority context within our schools? Are we developing our students to be critical thinkers? Can they address, analyze, deconstruct, and reconstruct? Or are we just fitting them to fit this course that we've all been working? Whose agenda are we actually meeting when we don't allow our students to be critical thinkers? So we need to impart more than this sanitized version of history. We have to challenge ourselves that our unconscious biases are not feeding a negative aspect of the curriculum to the children who will forever remember you. That to me is important. We need to be a positive force in the lives of all children. Thank you.
Yeah, I
Okay,
completely.
thank you, Valerie. I've just realised we've only got 10 minutes. So James, could you go next? 10 minutes left of the session.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd so agree with a lot of what Valerie is saying. Absolutely. For me as a student who was bullied out of school for being gay, and under the guise that Section 28 means that these issues can't be discussed, when actually Section 28 had ended 2 years earlier, there was no visibility for me. And I think a lot of students, like Valerie speaks of, don't see their own lives and know their own histories by going to school and learning what they learn in the curriculum. What I would say is that going back to that same school as a teacher, there's so much damning talk, especially about the English curriculum at the moment. But actually, I really believe that whilst some texts have been narrowed, the shift to exams has freed up so much more time. And it's up to us as teachers to ensure that we bring in diversity whenever we can into that, where there are opportunities to bring in short stories from other cultures, where there's opportunities to bring in additional poems about LGBT lifestyle, where there's opportunities to look at non-fiction surrounding disability, for example. Exam factories will not reflect diversity, but actually it's schools that choose to be the exam factory, not just the government telling us to be. And if we make time for it, we can turn the curriculum into what we want it to be. I also think that, however, like Valerie spoke about truth in education, that it's so important that we as educators, when we're delivering these curriculums, we know what we are talking about and we educate ourselves. Recently, the discussions surrounding J.K. Rowling, especially on EduTwitter, were massively unhelpful when people were trying to lead the discussion when they didn't know what they were talking about. And it's really key as teachers that we learn first and then we share, rather than just speaking our minds.
Yeah, so I want to just echo a few of the things that Valerie and James has said. My session today was all about diversity in the history curriculum, and I completely agree with the points that have been made. And I said that one of the points that I made is that a student in an English school in their Key Stage 3 curriculum, and fewer BME students go on to study a non-compulsory study of history, probably because of this. They could study African history through the slave trade and then through the American Civil Rights Movement, and that could be the end of it. And both of those topics are really reinforcing Africans as victims. So it's either, you know, a victim that's been oppressed or somebody that's been triumphant because they were previously a victim. And I think we totally need to reassess how diversity is addressed throughout the curriculum. We can't bolt it on. We can't have British, because that does include, you know, if we look at the fabric of our society, especially post 1945, British means something different to how some people conceptualize that in the classroom. But if we choose to just have standalone inquiries that don't add to the overall narrative that students are given, then they will, you know, in students' heads augment themselves as standalone examples, and that does nothing to promote integration in society. So I think that students' historical perspective needs to be broadened throughout, absolutely throughout Key Stage 3. But as James has said as well, there are opportunities to look at how that's done throughout the whole curriculum. And the key thing for me is that we don't take a tokenistic approach. We don't bolt it on. We don't do Black History Month and then that's Black history done. It has to be absolutely integral to the entire curriculum. I'm seeing a couple of happy faces there.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, absolutely, Catherine. You can't just have Black History Month. Black History is for 12 months. It's for life. It's what it is. It's history. I would like to see the eradication of micro oppression for Black people, people of color, ethnicity, gender, and just for these people to be left alone, to get on with their own devices. Because when I look at so the Rhonda McGee, she's a professor of law. She talks about like the very subtle ways we have been trained to see each other through these lenses of differences, and just the marginalization of populations. And it's now about teaching our children, who are going to run the world, our next generation, about slavery, about Black history, about all these things that happen, instead of trying to sweep it under the carpet and just completely forget about it, because it is a history, and it's not about, oh, well, it's in the past, but actually it's right here now. So although it's something that happened, it's still there, it's still within us. And I think as well, we're looking at the systemic racism that's from the helm, Parliament, there's more that they could actually do with the curriculum. I mentioned about the CPD, when we're doing the whole safeguarding, we could actually add in an 8-week program of Black awareness. So when we're saying about 8 weeks, it's something, with the whole neuroscience of the brain, it's generally that 8 weeks of learning, then you start seeing connections, synaptic connections change in your brain. So it's something that I think should be something that we should be doing more of, on a wider scale. So yeah. I know we're short on time.
Right, thank you very much, Trevor. I think we could probably spend hours and hours talking about curriculum and all the changes we could make and how we would do things. And I'm very conscious that we've literally only got about 5 minutes left. So this is a really big question. So just a quick answer, please. Assume you have been invited to join a DFE advisory group. on the purpose of education in 2020 and beyond. So what I want to hear from you is, what are your 3 key areas of focus? Just 3 off the top of your head. What is the most important thing that you want?
Me, exploring how education contributes to systemic racism. That's one thing for me. Looking at the role of politics within education, because I think that's huge. The other thing for me is unpicking what I'm beginning to see as an anti-intellectual approach to education, where educators seem to be less important to the process than they should be. It seems to be closing in on us, where we just facilitate rather than educate. So those are my 3.
My 3 would be, firstly, I'd like to see schools and education, again, treating students as unique individuals and not using them as progress makers who create good data. I'd like to see a greater diversity of teachers and who these people are delivering curriculums and designing curriculums, and especially in leadership, more diversity. And equally, I'd like to see more time for teachers to learn about equalities and to equip. Being an equalities activist is not a one-person job. It's about everyone doing their bit to make this a normalised and utilised and everyday part of our discussions and discourses.
Okay, my 3, I'll do them really briefly. Number 1, so important, have a proper respect for the fabric of British society and have a clear understanding of why we are as we are today. And that kind of links onto my 2nd, which is ensure that the history curriculum, so slight repetition, develops students' appreciation of a diverse past. And then one thing that I think is absolutely essential for creating unity is to prepare, that the curriculum prepares students, not just the history curriculum, the curriculum as a whole prepares students for participation in a pluralist society.
Yeah, and mine would be, sort of metacognition, metacognitive awareness of self, and just how we are within society. And the other one was just that whole non-judgmental awareness, because we spend so much of our time judging people, and in fact we spend so much of our time judging ourselves. And if we're pointing the finger, then we've got 3 coming back at us. So that's that whole sort of the non-judgment awareness, and just the unconscious biases, and for many, I guess, the conscious biases as well. Just for those now to sort of come to be more attuned with actually what reflects society. I guess what Catherine was saying, Valerie and James as well.
All right, thank you very much. I think that pretty much concludes our session, actually. I just want to thank you all very, very much for your very, very interesting responses. I think, unfortunately, because with it being Friday and being really busy, people working, we've not had a chance to actually look at all the presentations. And in due course, maybe if we did that, we should have a proper reflection, a little bit more in depth, and maybe a longer session as well. So it just remains for me to say thank you to you guys, and thank you to everyone who's watching and listening. And I know that Emma is waiting to be admitted so that she can close off the day. Thank you very much, guys. Well done.
Hello, everybody. I've just been sitting here stunned with respect at how you can all be so articulate at this time of day. I've slightly run out of words. That was stunning. And I think what Raj just said is really important. Today's really just been the beginning, hasn't it? I mean, I've hardly had a chance to get into any sessions because I've been in the back rooms dealing with technology demons, and I want to go away and watch them all and listen to them all. And I think maybe there is a very real possibility of asking you guys to come back and asking some of the people who had technological problems to come back. And actually, I think there's an appetite probably for more of this. So this is the beginning of a journey. I know it's nearly time for everybody to go. I just need to say a few small things. So a couple of really, really important thank yous. People keep thanking me. I don't have a clue when it comes to technology. I'm quite good at asking people to do things, but I don't have a clue. And there's a young man, he is very young, I think I'm old enough to be his mum, called Richard Robinson, who's been behind all of this. And every time Val's clapping him, I have had a problem with something, or someone else has had a problem with something. I've just batted it straight back to Richard. And he has worked, I swear he's been working for the last 24 hours solid to upload all the videos and everything else. Richard is a web designer as well, and if anyone does need to work with someone absolutely brilliant and reliable and calm and tolerant and patient, then please do hunt him down, because he is pure gold. I want to thank my line manager at Aspire, Eleanor, who has supported me hugely through all of this, and Deborah Rutley, whose idea this was, and said, Emma, do it. I want to thank all of you. That word privilege keeps coming up again and again and again, and I am so privileged in so many different ways, but I'm especially privileged that I managed to persuade all of you today, 80 of you, to give up your time on a work day. And people have been working today, by the way, Daily Mail, if you're watching, people have actually been teaching and working and going in and out of classrooms and at school and doing all of the things they have to do anyway, as well as giving themselves to this. And I know how much heart has gone on into today. I know how sick with nerves many people who you would imagine, people who are head teachers, people who you think are unflappable. Every single person who spoke today was nervous. Every single person in their own way has been 10%, 20%, 30% braver. And it's been really special. And I don't think I really have a sense yet of how special it is and what the impact's going to be. And I just remember my final point, I'm going to an inset with Jill Berry, Queen of Twitter, early on. And she said, right, she said at the end, she said, if you go away and nothing changes as a result of this, you've wasted your time. So decide what you're going to do, whether it's simply that when you Google for a picture of a person, as Anjum said, you make sure you represent a diversity of people on your PowerPoint presentations, whether it's about going and having a conversation, reading a book, challenging people rather than just being nice all the time, which is my problem. Whatever it is, just decide to do it and do it. And that brings us to the end. My boss has told me I have to do this, so I'm going to say cheers. So all of you, and have a wonderful weekend, and get on the website next week, because there will be thousands of megabytes, gigabytes of material on there with the videos and everything else. So thank you, everybody. And that's us over and out. Cheers.